of 5 of the full bench's 11 justices, including DeMoritz, who last Friday ordered the platform blocked for refusing to name a local legal representative as required by law. It will stay suspended, meaning Twitter, until it complies with his orders and pays outstanding fines that as of last week exceeded $3 million. Where's a guy like Elon Musk going to get $3 million? Anyway, the platform has clashed with DeMoritz over its reluctance to block users. So they want Elon Musk to censor more. That's what this is really about. And they want him to name a local legal representative so they can arrest him.
Yeah.
That's what this is about. And he has alleged that DeMoritz, so he says that DeMoritz, meaning Elon Musk, that he wants an in-country legal representative so Brazil authorities can exert their leverage over the company by having someone to arrest. And this is what that guy looks like, by the way. Just
Yeah.
just so you know. Why? Central
A little
casting?
bit scary. Yeah.
Could you bring up the supervillain? Thank you very much.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it's he's got the whole Doctor Evil thing going.
100%. I think he has a white cat on his lap and he burns a barrel of oil just for fun. DeMoritz also set a daily fine of 50,000 rias, or that's $8,900, for people or companies using virtual private networks or VPNs to access X. Boy, I did. By the way, I didn't know I needed a VPN. Now I know why. They're making them more popular than ever by doing this.
Right. Yeah. It's a Streisand effect.
That's exactly. So
Mhm.
Brazil is one of the biggest markets for Twitter with tens of millions of users. It's the second most populous country in the Western Hemisphere. It blocks dramatic escalation in the month-long feud between Musk and DeMoritz over free speech, far-right accounts, and misinformation. They just can't stop it from calling free speech far-right. Twitter's block already led DeMoritz last week to freeze the Brazilian financial assets of Starlink as a means to force it to cover Twitter's fines, reasoning that the two companies are part of the same economic group. The company says it has more than 250,000 clients in Brazil, meaning Starlink. Legal experts have questioned the legal basis of that move, and Starlink's you think? And Starlink's law firm Verano has told the AP it has appealed the freeze. It declined to comment further. Okay. Do you understand that Musk could hire his own army to come down there and squash you guys if he wanted to? Okay. And most of them would be former people who worked for you. The arguments from Musk, a self-proclaimed free speech absolutist. I can't get over that term, free speech absolutist. That's
always in quotes too. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That either you're for free speech or you're not. There's like, I'm for the free speech that I like. Well, then you're not for free speech. Then you're just for speech you like. Like as Chomsky points out, if you're not for speech that you despise, then you're not for free speech. And anybody's could be for speech that they like.
Right. Yeah. There were a lot of these folks who are I'm for free speech, but
right.
That's a phrase that I see a lot on social media.
Well, what's weird is here they do it again, Matt. They say that the free speech absolutists have found fertile ground with Brazil's political right. Well, why wouldn't that be on the political left? Lefties are supposed to be the ones who are oppressed by the government. They're supposed to be the ones that the establishment is always trying to oppress. That's why those are the people who need free speech. So this idea that they just want to couch it that way, that it's a right-wing thing to make lefties be allergic to it, right? Don't you think that's a big part of it?
Sounds like you want Benylin. Fluent in... Nacho fries. Salsa, cheese sauce, sour cream. Delicious and just for me. They're nacho fries. Nacho fries.
Give your taste buds something to sing about at New York Fries.
Far right has just become a synonym for, like unorthodox or bad or, politically undesirable. We've all been categorized as far right or Trump supporters just for not supporting things like Russiagate or the war in Ukraine or whatever. It's just a catch-all phrase that they use. I remember on the first day that the Twitter files came out, the Washington Post described me as conservative journalist Matt Taibbi. Put out this thing. and they kind of silent edited it, but it's just the reflex now is that if you do anything in support of free speech, that codes as a right wing concern, and they just describe you that way automatically, even though uh, they're actually going after people on the left and the right with censorship. It's really anybody who's a critic of any um, you know social democracy that uses these kinds of enforcement powers.
Well, what's funny is here it says on Brazil's orders, Twitter previously has shut down accounts, including of lawmakers affiliated with Bolsonaro's right wing party and a far right activist accused of undermining Brazilian democracy. That's what this is about. They want to make sure that they have control of the narrative because once the establishment loses control of the narrative, then they have to start disappearing people, which they will do, but it's a lot harder. So it's much easier to just do this, to use censorship and banning. And so people have always made this point to me. Well, here they say here, Bolsonaro and his allies. This is how the AP reports this. Bolsonaro and his allies have cheered on Musk for defying them more. So now, if you're free speech, you're part of this extreme right wing political movement. Supporters rallied in April along Rio de Janeiro's Copacabana beach with the giant sign reading "Brazil thanks Elon Musk." So you're a right winger. Earlier this month, Demorris ordered an investigation into Musk over the dissemination of defamatory fake news and another probe over possible obstruction, incitement, and criminal organization. Bolsonaro is also the target of a Demorris probe over whether the former president had a role in, get ready for this, inciting an attempted coup to overturn the results of the 2022 election that he lost. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
That's a little bit familiar, right?
The exact same thing that happened here in the United States in 2020. The FBI instigated a riot, which they called an attempted coup, and they tried to pin it on Donald Trump. And what I always say is, really, a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up at the Capitol to overthrow the government, and son of a bitch, they forgot their guns.
Right,
Isn't
they
that
left them home.
Oh,
Yeah.
I bet that was embarrassing for them. Mike, did you bring the guns? No, I brought mittens. So, of course, that wasn't. That was now, and now it gets revealed over and over that Nancy Pelosi was the one who didn't allow them to have the National Guard there and didn't allow them to have the proper. And that was and when the head of the FBI was being questioned under congressional testimony, and he was asked, how many FBI assets did you have dressed up as MAGA supporters inside the Capitol before the riot started? He said, I can't answer that question. Well, the answer should be zero.
Right.
But they did. So that's what. And here's the one more thing I want to ask you about is so Lula is supposed to be this big lefty. So turns out he's not. Turns out Lula bent the knee to the CIA and the establishment. So if people, let me just get people caught up to speed. So Lula, they didn't want that. He was a big lefty. They didn't want him to become president. He was going to become president, so they threw him in prison. And then they thought the center right guy was going to win, but he didn't. Guess who won? Bolsonaro, who was the far right candidate. He was like the Trump of Brazil. And they're like, oh shit, how do we fix this? So the only guy who could beat Bolsonaro at the ballot box was Lula. So they had to let him back out of prison. And then as soon as he beat Bolsonaro in the election, they then made it illegal for Bolsonaro to run for. It's the same thing they're doing here. And they did it with this, again, another, isn't it interesting? Another insurrection at the Capitol in Brazil. The same, it's a little too on the nose, but of course it never gets reported that way here in the United States. So Bolsonaro is in bed. And by the way, he also questioned the election results of Venezuela, which is another tip-off that he's in bed with the economic hitmen of the Western Hemisphere. So maybe he got threatened. Maybe they're going to throw. So whatever it was, he is now working for the people he's supposed to be opposing. What else would you like to talk about? Well, what is your opinion?
I think all of this is just fascinating because the playbook is so exactly the same as you say. One of the first things that we looked at in the Twitter files was the decision to remove Donald Trump from Twitter which was based on his tweets around January 6th. And even within Twitter, they didn't have an actual violation or of terms of service that they could use to technically bounce him from the platform. But they were getting all these calls from all over the place, from Washington, and they had eventually sort of adjusted their definition of incitement to become this more stochastic terrorism like thing, where it was the entire holistic effect of his tweets and the likelihood that those would inspire people to violent conduct. And this is the same kind of standard they're trying to impose in Brazil now, and in Europe, by the way, with the Digital Services Act, which is the absolute template for the kind of law that all these countries want to impose eventually, which is like a sort of mandated, involuntary, deputized censorship situation. And if you don't do it, if you don't get rid of people who are designated to be inciters or misinformationists or whatever the term of the day is, then you yourself are going to be held responsible as if you committed the conduct yourself. And that's a very serious thing. I think it's not an accident that Mark Zuckerberg freaked out and sent a letter last week, because I think he sees the writing on the wall that there's this bizarre movement out there that is going to hold all these people, is going to force them into doing this very, very extreme thing, for in perpetuity, forever, and not get a whole lot in return. And it's very scary, I think.
So here's what the Wall Street Journal. So here's how they reported Lula siding against Elon Musk. A quote from Lula is, "The world is not obliged to put up with Musk's far-right ideology just because..." He was a Democrat 5 minutes ago, right?
I know.
Just like RFK Jr., just like Tulsi. Far-right ideology just because he is rich. Brazil, one of the world's largest democracies, shut down Twitter over the weekend after Supreme Court Justice Alexandra de Moraes outlawed the social media platform for failing to suspend accounts that he asserted contained hate speech and misinformation. So this is and they also, in January 2023, thousands of anti-government protesters stormed Congress, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court in what De Silva has claimed was a coup attempt. So so Lula is completely compromised. You can't trust a thing he says or does. And by the way, he's mandated the COVID vaccines. So he's completely rolled over for the economic hitmen and the CIA, and he's looking out for himself. That's what happened. Everybody thought Lula was a hero. He's not.
Doesn't that make you lose respect for the CIA and for some of these institutions that they can't come up with two different stories?
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Right? I mean, come on. At least make it a little bit different. Yeah, even the worst Hollywood writers, when they do a sequel, they don't just do it all over again, from the beginning. But this stuff is really just exactly the same. So it is embarrassing. And the Lula thing, I think you can see it in the way that Glenn Greenwald responded to all this. Like, I mean, he used to be a fan, and now clearly not, right? So it's just part of this movement all around the world, all over the westernized world, where if platform owners don't go along with this, sort of satanic bargain about speech, then they're going to face the most extreme consequences. And, it's going to be huge financial penalties. And, if you don't leave a hostage in the country like de Moraes is demanding, we're gonna punish you for that, or like Dorff, they're gonna be arrested. It's incredible. This would have been unthinkable 10 years ago.
I mean, this is, I hate to be a word police person, but this is what fascism is. This is when the elite, the establishment, control you by suppressing your speech and by demonizing you and controlling the propaganda. They're propagandizing their own people, just like they're propagandizing their own. When I had it was a heartbreaker for me when I had Cornel West on the show, and I was showing him similar things about how the same statutes, the same RICO statute, which are only supposed to be used for the mafia, they were using it against Donald Trump, and the same statutes and the same grand jury that they're used against Donald Trump in Georgia, they're using against Stop Cop City protesters. And they said, do you now see the game they're playing? Anybody who goes against the establishment, they're going to criminalize. And he said he called me a Trump supporter for that. So that was a big heartbreaker because it takes courage to say that. I knew I was going to be called a right winger. I was going to be called a Trump supporter for saying that. But I couldn't say it and look. I couldn't not say it and look myself in the mirror. Apparently, Cornel West doesn't have that problem. He can pretend, but
Yeah,
here's
it's